Hello, my name is Lucy Auditory, and for my research and advocacy project, I've decided to look into specific learning disability, and specifically, I'd like to talk about dyslexia as an example of a specific learning disability. Just some definitions. Learning disabilities for students are important to continually redefine due to the political environment around the subject. A specific learning disability is used by teachers, doctors, and professionals as a disorder that stems from characteristics of the brain and produces struggles for students to learn and the inability to gain academic skills that are appropriate for their age group. Specific learning disabilities can often become a gray area for many educators, parents, and medical professionals due to the confusion regarding the overall definition and the broad interpretation laws provide for them, which we'll get into them later in the presentation. Dyslexia is mentioned in IDEA, which is a federal law for education as an example of a specific learning disability, but there is not a solid definition and there are no standards given to states on how to implement resources for students with this disability. Just a little bit of historical context. For the sake of time, I've put the link with the timeline up here, but I'm just going to briefly go through some of this timeline and try to not leave anything out. The term in 1877, the term word blindness was discovered by Adolf Kusamal, which is the very beginning of discovering learning disabilities and specifically dyslexia. In 1887, Rudolf Berlin redefines the definition of word blindness as dyslexia. So this is the first time the word has actually come into the spotlight. And then I'd like to just take a second to define dyslexia in my own terms, which it is a language-based learning disability. Dyslexia refers to a cluster of symptoms which result in people having difficulties with specific language skills, particularly reading. Students with dyslexia usually experience difficulties with other language skills such as spelling, writing, and pronouncing words. And dyslexia is a learning disability because it can make it very difficult for a student to succeed academically in the typical and normal classroom environment. And in its more severe forms, students will also qualify for special education and special accommodations or extra support services. So moving on to 1895, a gentleman named James Hinshelwood discovered early identification of dyslexia, which is crucial for teachers to begin helping their students and the importance of this for the younger students. In 1969, Congress passes the Children with Specific Learning Disabilities Act, which was really important because it is included in the Education of the Handicapped Act, and this is the first time federal law mandates support services for students with learning disabilities. In 1975, the Education for All Handicapped Children mandates a free, appropriate public education for all students, and later in 1990, this is renamed IDEA as a federal law, which we'll talk about later. In 1996, a doctor named Guinevere Eden uses a research team and also a process known as fMRI that allows us to look at the activity in living brains to identify the regions of the brain that behave differently in dyslexics, which is really important because research for dyslexia on the brain is especially important now in present day. And in 1979, IDEA is reauthorized and regular education teachers are included in the IEP process. And lastly, in 2005, Dr. Jeffrey Gruen and his research team at Yale University identified a gene that had patterns and variations that were strongly associated with dyslexia. Again, research on the brain with dyslexia is very important because it's a biological disability. So going into the policy and practice, I'd really just like to touch upon IDEA. which is a special education law in the US where public schools provide free and accessible services to students who qualify for them through examination and observation. So this is the law that is supposed to define a specific learning disability, and that's where dyslexia falls under that category. FAPE is also where public schools provide a free, appropriate public education to students with disabilities, which is so important due to the access to these resources. And then LRE, which is the least restrictive environment. Therefore, students accept these services while learning alongside their peers whenever it is possible. I specifically think this is very important from my experience growing up with a learning disability and an IEP since from kindergarten to high school, because I would always encourage a student, even though they have a disability, to try and at least learn in an environment that they are surrounded with their peers. Only when they need the one-on-one help should they be taken out of their learning environment. And I really think this is important for the social aspect. And then we have the child find, which is specific policies in public schools to identify, locate, and evaluate students suspected of needing special education. Appropriate policies and procedures must be created by public schools to find these children. Obviously, this is very important because if we didn't identify these children, they would not be getting the support they need. So that's very important. I'd also like to point out that there are 13 conditions listed by IDEA where that students are supposed to qualify for special education services. And one of these is a specific learning disability, and that's where dyslexia and other specific learning disabilities such as dyscalculia come in. I just see a lot of problems with this, specifically that not every child that is diagnosed with a disability such as dyslexia or any other specific learning disability can qualify for special education supports under IDEA. A child needs to be showing signs of severity that their learning is highly impacted by the disability. So if you're doing well in your classes, but your teachers don't realize that you are struggling as a student, you wouldn't necessarily qualify for these services, which is unfortunate. And also, IDEA isn't always specific about everything. It doesn't define dyslexia specifically, and it also doesn't tell states how schools should address this, which is pretty important. And researchers are only beginning to incorporate biological aspects to learning disabilities, such as dyslexia, but there is no brain scan for suspected students with dyslexia or other learning disabilities to confirm positive results. And therefore, dyslexia is once again a biological disability, and there's just more research and especially research on the brain that is needed for students to continue getting the services they need. I'd like to touch upon also dyslexia laws. Only some states have passed dyslexia laws because IDEA's loose interpretation of dyslexia as a specific learning disability allows states to implement this law in different ways, which is unfortunate because IDEA does not tell states how schools should accurately address it, and states therefore enforce IDEA in a multitude of different ways, and schools in each state can also give more or less support for students with dyslexia. Dyslexia laws therefore aim to provide students with ample support and protection for their level of disability by providing more detail than the looser interpretation that IDEA seeks to do. And this law also ensures that schools operate the same within the same state. And I just think that this is so important because obviously all students should be getting the same amounts of support that they qualify for and that they need. And it's unfortunate that some states do not implicate these dyslexia laws. A lot of the ways that these dyslexia laws vary in each state, although regard to the early screening for dyslexia in kids from K through 3, some states do this, some states don't. Procedures for screening in states or schools, training and professional development for current teachers, education about dyslexia that can be implemented into teacher preparation programs, accommodations, early intervention, or other forms of support for students with dyslexia, and then school-wide funding programs are also not apparent in every single state, which is unfortunate. These dyslexia laws passed in states can also contribute to more research on the disability. And so this really helps because research can be displayed in these current state guidelines for dyslexia and help each school shape their policies regarding evaluating, identifying, and teaching current students with dyslexia, which I also think is very important because you should be continually evaluating these policies and changing them as the students need different kinds of support. Also, a lot of these laws are usually led by parents who usually lead the efforts for disability laws to be passed in certain states. And a good example I have of this is Mary D'Angelo, who is a mother of a 23-year-old daughter who was diagnosed with dyslexia in second grade. This is a nice little picture of them. And she went to the Maryland State House in Annapolis to urge lawmakers to support two bills to identify students with dyslexia at an earlier age and to provide better training for teachers. Daughter Nina also attended the event and discussed her struggles from a student's perspective, which is very important. And a spot opened on the County Commission on Disability Issues. D'Angelo applied and got the position. Today, she serves as vice co-chair, and one of the bills has since been passed in the state Senate. Since D'Angelo spoke at the state house, she now continues to be an advocate and encourages other teachers to help serve their children as well. Also, parents, she encourages to help serve. She's done a lot in this category, and she's just been a great advocate for this. So she's a great example of these dyslexia laws and what they're doing for students. Also, I'd just like to add in here at the bottom that New York State Education Department has policies and guidelines for implementing dyslexia laws in our state, and I've put the link down here if you want to look more at it, but they also have other policies for dysgraphia, dyscalculia, other types of specific disabilities as well, which is very fortunate because that's where we are. So getting into the theoretical background, I wanted to touch upon a theory known as a phonological deficit theory. I got this from Theories of Specific Learning Disabilities and Dyslexia, which is a bunch of journal case studies gathered in 2023. I've also put the link up here if you want to read more about this, but the theory is the main cause of reading difficulties, and it includes developmental dyslexia. It is basically failing to identify the main components of speech, which is the leading cause of reading and spelling difficulty. This also has sparked phonological awareness, which is a skill that involves the knowledge about the sounds that make up words, and failure to master this skill leads to problems pronouncing words when reading. So this is really important, but also this theory is based only on phonics and evaluating students on their phonics skills to diagnose them with dyslexia, which can be difficult to do just because there's not a lot of variation. And I also wanted to add this study that Hayward had done, which is Hayward studied the common phonological awareness errors in first grade children, and the results indicated that those children with poor reading performance were more prone to exhibit errors such as insertion and omission of letters, phonemic segmentation, and substitution. So again, this is just another example of how some theorists have diagnosed students with dyslexia based off of their phonics skills. And again, this is in the link up here, so you can read more about this if you would like to. And lastly, the theory does not support other symptoms concerning reading disorders, or what I would say also is dyslexia, because poor motor skills, slow processing speed, lack of automation, maths difficulties, auditory processing problems, and visual problems are also results of dyslexia or reading disorders. So now strategies for change. I wanted to touch upon again the dyslexia laws, which are great for politicians and school administrators to look into and keep doing further research on. And then I would talk about multisensory learning for students and teachers, which came up a lot in my research. And this is just different ways to implicate learning using different parts of the body other than sight or hear or touch. You're using all sorts of different senses. And there's a list of different activities that teachers have tried with students with dyslexia that have been successful. A lot of them I found very interesting as well. Sand writing was one of them where the student writes their letters that they're given by the teacher in the sand with their finger, and they spell out the word, and this just helps their brain process these sounds and remember this word because they are using different senses of the body. And then lastly, just a resource for parents I thought was really helpful, which I would use if I had a child with dyslexia, is the Stanford University Reading and Dyslexia Research Program. And this is great because it gives information on reading and dyslexia. It gives dyslexia evaluation and coaching, dyslexia intervention programs, and books. So this is a great resource for the parents as well. And that concludes my presentation. This is just my links, but I hope this was a informational topic for everyone. And dyslexia really does need a lot more research, especially due to the biological aspects. So I hope this summed up some confusion, and I thank you so much for listening to my project.